Hello and welcome to TVS Correspondent, the show where we take a look at what's happening in the US and around the world. I am Radzi Ahmad, and with me is our correspondent for the United States of America, who is now in Washington, D.C., Alfian Zaini. Alfian, it's always great to have you on the show again. How are you doing?
Likewise, nice to see you again, Radzi. It's fantastic, even though it's cold here in DC. Yeah.
Well, I hope you keep yourself warm. Great, let's get into what has happened in the past week. As many of our viewers probably have heard, on Saturday, an underwater volcano in the South Pacific had erupted violently. The eruption from the Tonga volcano was so strong that it had sent a measurable and visible shockwave across the entire world. The eruption was also so powerful that it reached high into the stratosphere and triggered tsunami warnings across multiple countries. The satellite footage you're seeing right now shows the massive ash cloud from the eruption breaking high into the stratosphere, along with tons of sulfur dioxide, which is known to have a global cooling effect when ejected in large amounts. Now, Alfian, could you provide us with the details on the eruption on Saturday and the impact that it had on the local surroundings?
Of course, the Hanga Tonga Hanga Ha'apai volcano, as they say it, about 30 kilometers southeast of Tonga's Fonoa Fo'ou Island, first erupted on Friday and its second time on Saturday around 5:26 p.m. local time. The eruptions sent a plume of ash, gas, and steam 20 kilometers into the air. Satellite imagery showed a massive ash cloud and shock waves spreading from the eruption. Ash was falling from the sky in the Tonga capital, Nuku'alofa, Saturday evening, and phone connections were down. The eruption caused a severe tsunami on Tonga Tapu, where the capital is located, with waves flowing onto coastal roads and flooding properties on Saturday. Boats and large boulders were washed ashore, and shops along the coast were damaged. Radio New Zealand reported that residents fled for higher ground as waves swept the waterfront, Main Street, and grounds of Tonga's royal palace. And though it was early evening, videos show the sky already dark from the ash cloud, Razi.
And what was the New Zealand government's response to this natural disaster, Alfian?
New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said it's not clear how widespread the damage is yet, but the government has committed an initial $340,000 in relief supplies, technical support, and supporting local responses with the country's defense force sending assistance to Tonga. While conditions in the area seems stable, further eruption activity cannot be ruled out. Razi.
The eruption also had effects across the Pacific as tsunami warnings and advisories were issued from parts of New Zealand and Japan to Canada's British Columbia and the United States. Now, what can you tell us about the situation in the US, Alfian?
Well, seeing as there is nothing but the ocean between Hanga Tonga volcano and the west coast of the United States, tsunami waves did arrive here. According to the National Weather Service in San Diego, the highest waves recorded were 1.3 meters in Port St. Louis, California, 1 meter waves at King Cove, Alaska, 1.1 meters in Area Cove and Crescent City, California, and 2.9 feet waves in Port Rice, California. According to the National Tsunami Warning Center, the initial coastal tsunami advisory included the states of California, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. However, all of the advisories had been lifted by early Sunday morning. Razi.
Were there any major damage to the coasts of the US, Alfian?
So far, there was no major damage reported in any of the West Coast locations impacted by the tsunami. The same can be said over in the Hawaiian Islands, where the tsunami advisory for Hawaii was canceled by the Pacific Tsunami Warning on Saturday morning. Adam Weintraub, a spokesperson for the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, said there were no reports of major damage so far, though the effects had been felt across multiple islands. The impacts were the equivalent of a hiking tide, as there had been flooding in parking lots, and harbor areas that Weintraub characterized as nuisance flooding. As of this recording, officials were still assessing the damage, Razi.
Well, I guess we're lucky that a volcanic eruption of this magnitude hadn't caused major damage globally as massive eruptions tend to do. But nonetheless, new eruptions cannot be ruled out from the Tonga volcano, including a repeat of Saturday's eruption. We will keep a close eye on the volcanic activity, informing you of any significant development, so stay tuned to TVS for that. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Don't go anywhere. We are back on TVS Correspondent and moving swiftly along to our next item on the agenda. We are now entering our third year of the COVID-19 pandemic, with no signs of ebbing anywhere in sight. To the last week of December 2021, the novel coronavirus was raging in almost 200 countries and had killed more than 5.3 million people. Such is the impact of the pandemic that the average life expectancy has plummeted in several countries. The fear and turmoil have deepened since the arrival of Omicron, by far the most mutated and transmissible of all five variants of concern identified in the history of the COVID-19 pandemic. Derailing all the progress made on containing the pandemic, the variants seem to breach immunity acquired through vaccination or natural infection. Now, with the arrival of the Omicron variant, the question now, Alfian, is, are we prepared to deal with it?
Unfortunately, Razi, when it comes to America, specifically its third year of dealing with this pandemic is likely to start as bleak as ever. We are woefully underprepared as the Omicron variant seems to breach immunity through vaccination or natural infections. But experts are hopeful that once the wave of cases, hospitalizations, and death caused by the Omicron variant ebbs, life will finally be able to more closely resemble normal. Razi.
How are things expected to play out in the early months of 2022 in America, Alfian?
Experts think the new year will start with an almighty surge of Omicron, but this will play out differently in various places. But it is hard to imagine anywhere will be spared, according to Bill Hanage, a professor of epidemiology at Harvard. By the time the spring rolls out, a lot of people are going to have had the experience of having had COVID. But the silver lining of a tough January and February is that most of the country could have some degree of immunity afterwards, either through vaccination, infection, or both, that helps protect them against severe COVID infections in the future. When we get to that point, unless we have a very bizarre variant come in that evades all protection, which would be unusual, then I think we could get to the point where we have this at a steady level. Razi.
Well, that seems to be the best case scenario, not just for the US, but for the entire world as a whole, Alfian.
It is, yes. The best possible scenario is Omicron tears through the population. It causes a month or a month and a half of economic disruption and illness, and then we're through it. But the worst case scenario is that Omicron ends up being much, much more severe, overwhelms and crushes our hospital systems, and then gets followed by a worse variant. And then, of course, there's the spectrum of scenarios in between the two. Radzi.
So let's say we get through it in the best case scenario. Is there any hope of life ever returning to normal, Alfian?
That's unlikely, Razi. Experts say that we're never going to be 100% done with the coronavirus. So we're never returning to a normal that's pre 2019. For one thing, COVID is going to be circulating and it's going to be part of our ongoing lives. The hope is that it becomes more like a background noise.
Well, I guess that's a fact that the world just has to live with from now on. Looking towards the future, are we prepared enough to deal with possible further pandemics of this scale, Alfian?
Again, unfortunately, this question before the world at the start of the pandemic has not changed either. This pandemic has been termed as an event that occurs once in a century or once in a lifetime. But according to Metabiota, a US-based firm that deals with pandemic threats, a pandemic similar to the current one and of zoonotic nature, has a 22 to 28% chance of striking in the next decade. Obviously, this is a cause for concern. Uh, Meanwhile, the 2021 Global Health Security, or GHS, index released by nonprofits Nuclear Threat Initiative and the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security shows countries across all income levels remain dangerously unprepared to meet future epidemic and pandemic threats. Suffice to say, dealing with the burden of the legacy left behind by COVID-19 is not going to be easy. Radzi.
It's not going to be easy indeed. Alfian, as always, thank you for the very insightful information.
You're very welcome, Radzi.
All right, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you for watching and join us next week on TVS Correspondent. I am Radzi Ahmad with Alfian Zaini. Stay safe and bye bye.